But we're going to get to the sermon this morning. We have all kinds of opportunities for Bible study. And there's all different kinds of formats available to us. In the past, it seems like it was gospel meetings after gospel meetings after gospel meetings. And we still have a lot of those in this area. But there's another format of summer series. You hear a lot about summer series, where they go through and pick a topic and different preachers come in through that summer. And sometime I wish I could slip away and go to some of those summer series, because most of those are during regular worship time. But there's another one, and that has to do with Vacation Bible School. Now, when I hear Vacation Bible School, my thought immediately goes to children. When I was young, Vacation Bible School was during the day. And all the men were off at work, and the women would come together, and a few men, and they would have Vacation Bible School during the day. It was for children. But now most Vacation Bible Schools are in the evening, and most Vacation Bible Schools have an adult class. Now, when it comes down to just some real good Bible study, some of the best Bible studies I have been in lately have been these adult Vacation Bible School classes. And so think about that now. We think, well, there's a gospel meeting. Maybe I ought to go, or maybe I could go to that. But think about these Vacation Bible Schools and the advantage that you can gain by being a student in the adult class. And I've been trying to get to several of those. Now, I'm being asked to be a part of several of those this summer. And before too long, I'll be going to Carthage, Tennessee, and they're going to have a Vacation Bible School. They're studying the heroes of faith, Hebrews chapter 11, and they've asked me to talk about Enoch. So I've been working on that and thought I'm just going to preach that here at Rockcliffe before I get up there to Carthage and teach that class on Enoch. But I'm going to expand this a little bit to the life and times of Enoch. Now, you probably remember Enoch before the flood. Enoch was translated that he should not see death. There are 3 that left this world without seeing death. That's not exactly right, but let me explain that. There's Enoch before the flood, during the patriarchal time. During the time of Israel, there is Elijah. Remember how he went up into heaven? In a whirlwind. And a lot of time we think he was in the chariot. Well, he may have been in the chariot, but he said he was taken up by a whirlwind and did not see death. And then in the New Testament, Jesus died, but he rose from the grave. And then you remember, after he rose, he ascended into heaven in the New Testament. Well, this is that Enoch, the life and times of Enoch. The text is Hebrews 11 and verse 5. By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found, because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God. He is the second in the book of Hebrews, in these heroes of faith in Hebrews 11, Abel being the first mentioned, and then Enoch after him as a hero of faith. Now, Enoch was a real person. There's some people think, well, all that, I'm going to be bringing a lesson on that too. Genesis 1 through 11, a lot of people, well, now all that's fable. The real story begins with Abraham, and all that other before that is just fable. Well, I'm going to show you that's not so. Enoch was in those early days, but he's a real person. And Luke gives a genealogy of Christ that begins with Jesus and Mary and then works itself all the way back to Adam. And in that genealogy, then he mentions Enoch. He's just as real as everyone else in that long genealogy in Luke chapter 3. Now, he lived in the old world. That's what Peter called it. The world that then was. It was the creation of God, and he lived at a time. We look at the beauty of this world now, but think what this world must have been when it was fresh from the hands of God. That's the time in which Enoch lived. But while the earth there was beautiful, the world, the people on the earth were not so pretty. Here's what it says in Genesis 6, 5, and 6. I'm not talking about their looks. I'm talking about their behavior. The wickedness of man was great in the earth, that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he'd made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. Just think of all God's creation. You look at that aurora that we saw and the stars in the sky and everything. Everything is in accordance with God's will. But man, that's the blot. God's sorry he even put man here. Now that makes Enoch all the more remarkable, because in that wicked time in which he lived, he stood out as a man that walked with God. Genesis 4, we read about Enoch, but now this is another Enoch. See, there were two Enochs back then. We'll talk this, Enoch number 1. He was a grandson of Adam through Cain. And here's what we read about him in Genesis 4:17. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch, and he builded a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. I bet Enoch was a nice place to live. It's probably a beautifully situated city, but I wouldn't want to live there because of the behavior of people. Let me go on and read about what happens to the line of Enoch. It says, and Enoch was born Irad, and Irad beget Mehujael, and Mehujael beget Methusael, and Methusael beget Lamech, and Lamech took unto him 2 wives. And then we have their names. That's not God's plan. That's on the line of Cain. And the fact that he's talking about this in Genesis 4, when we come to Genesis 6, there's been a lot of wild thoughts about these verses, but put it in this context. It came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. Isn't that what the writers, Moses has been writing about? And daughters were born unto them. And it talks about Lamech and his daughters that were born to him. It says that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all they chose. Well, who are the sons of God and who are the daughters of men? In the context, the sons of God are those who are born of Adam, the men that come from Adam. And the daughters of men are the daughters that were born to those men. And like Lamech, they're taking wives of all they choose. It's just the men on this earth, they're looking at all the women and they're getting all they want. And that was not God's plan. We read in Genesis 5, verses 21 through 24 about Enoch number 2. Now this is interesting. If you go down the genealogy of Cain and start counting with Adam, Cain, Enoch, count down the line, you come to Lamech, he's number 7. If you go by the line of Seth, Adam, Seth, I think it's Enos, and then you go on down and come to Enoch, and Enoch is number 7. Lamech, number 7 of Cain. Enoch, number 7 of Seth. But what a difference. What a difference. Enoch walked with God. And after he begat Methuselah, well, he lived 65 years and begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God. After he begat Methuselah 300 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Twice. It says Enoch walked with God. Well, when you start looking at that genealogy there in Genesis 6, we see they all died. Adam, he died. Seth, he died. Enos, he died. Canaan, he died. Mahalalel, Enoch's grandfather, well, he died. Jared, Enoch's father, he died. Methuselah, Enoch's son, he died. Lamech, Enoch's grandson, he died. It's different with Enoch. It doesn't say Enoch died. It simply said he was not, for God took him in Genesis 5 and verse 24. And we understand that by Hebrews 11:5, he was translated that he should not see death. Now, here's what happens when that translation occurs. We read in 1 Corinthians 15:24 through 52 that we shall be changed. And here's the change that's going to take place. Here's the translation that occurs. We go from dishonor to glory, from weakness to strength, from a natural body to a spiritual body, from a living soul to a quickening spirit, from the earthy to the heavenly, from corruption to incorruption, from mortal into immortality. We shall be changed. We shall be translated, as was Enoch. And we don't have to die to be changed. Now, those who do die will be raised again. But there will be people here when the Lord returns, and they will be changed like Enoch was without death. 1 Thessalonians 4:17. We which are alive and remain shall be called up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Now that already happened to Enoch. And though we die, we'll be raised again, and we'll have this new body, and we'll ascend to meet the Lord in the air. And those that are alive will already be there. They'll go first, and we will meet them in the air. Hebrews 11:5 says that it was by faith that Enoch did what he did. That's why he's in there. Genesis 5:21 through 24 says Enoch walked with God. Put those two together. It's by faith Enoch walked with God. You see, we read in Romans chapter 10:17, faith comes by hearing the word of God. How did Enoch walk with God by faith? How did he do that? The implication is they had the word of God. Now, in what form they had it, we are not told, but most likely it was the form in which it was spoken by the prophets of those days. That helps us understand 1 Peter 3:18 through 20. It's talking about Christ. And it says Christ, after he suffered, he was put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit. See the spiritual element here? quickened by the Spirit, by which, that's by the same Spirit. It says, he also went and preached unto the spirits in prison, which sometimes were disobedient, when the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. In spirit, Jesus had gone to those souls in that prison of sin, where every imagination of the thought of man's heart was only evil continually. In spirit, he had preached to them in that time before the flood. That's why we read in Genesis 6 in verse 3, my spirit shall not always strive with man's spirit. God was striving with the spirit of man through his word before the flood. And Enoch, he walked with God. He took heed to that word. And God used Enoch as one of those prophets to those people. We read that in the book of Jude, verses 14 and 15. Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of thee, saying, behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Enoch was a prophet of God, striving with men by the word of God, the Spirit coming to him, warning those people in that old time that there's a judgment coming. But they didn't listen. And the judgment came. The Spirit of God strives with man now. And the Spirit of God strives with man through his word. And he convicts man and warns of a judgment to come. Jesus said, I'll tell you the truth. It's expedient that I go away. If I go not away, the Comforter will not come unto you. But if I depart, I'll send him unto you. And when he has come, he'll reprove the world of sin, of righteousness, and of judgment. Of sin, because they believe not on me. Of righteousness, because I go to my Father and you see me no more. Of judgment, because the prince of this world is judged. And so the Comforter came upon those men selected by Jesus, and they spake forth the word of the Lord. And that's how the Spirit of God strives with men today. It's through the words that he has given. And he warns of that judgment. In 2 Peter 3 and verse 7, the heavens and the earth, which now are by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire, unto the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. That's those ungodly men Enoch spoke of. And the judgment then was of water. And the judgment then to come will be a fire. Now, Hebrews 11:5. Enoch had this testimony, that he pleased God. When God was even sorry he'd put man on the earth, he looks and there's Enoch, and he pleased God. He took heed to his word. And he believed his word. And he obeyed his word. God is well pleased when we do this from the heart. And it turned Enoch into a good man in the midst of a wicked world. We read elsewhere in the book of Hebrews how to please God. Hebrews 13, 16 through 17. Let us offer the sacrifice of praise. That's our worship. It's the fruit of our lips. That's our song. But then it says, giving thanks to his name. Remember how we read and read it. Neither were they thankful. If you read into this, and this is how you please God, then Enoch worshiped God. Enoch was thankful, and Enoch did good. But to do good, Enoch did good. And this has to do with our fellow man. And it says, and to communicate, forget not. To communicate, that doesn't mean conversation here. This is that word for fellowship. This is that word for contribution. This is that word for sharing. Enoch worshiped God. He thanked God. He did good to his fellow man. And he was benevolent toward his fellow man in their need. And then we read, with such sacrifices, God is well pleased. You want to know how to please God? Well, this is the book that teaches us how to please God. This is that word. And if we please God, we won't have to fear when the judgment comes. We too will be translated either before or after death, and will rise to meet him in the air and dwell with him in eternity. And so Enoch, a hero of faith, and one we want to emulate. Do you believe the word? And will you obey? Begin that obedience by being baptized into Christ. And then rise to walk, to worship him, and to do good. And to be benevolent toward your fellow man. And if you're ready to do that this morning, then we'll sing the invitation song. You can let that be done. We stand and sing.